Welcome to Lombardi's Legends podcast, part of the Pigskin Podcast Network and Amaze Media Labs. My name is Wags, and joining me is my co-host Dane. We are streaming live on a Sunday morning on our Facebook and YouTube channels, as well as available to subscribe and download wherever you get your podcast. So, Dano, the preseason
Wags.
is over. The 53-man rosters are set, and next week we have week one of the NFL season. So today we are going to get into our breakouts, player prop bets, over-unders, and season predictions. One of my favorite podcasts of the year. But Dane, I think to start with, I'm going to turn it over to you. What are your overall feelings with this team coming out of the preseason camp and now that the roster's set and as we look forward here to the season getting started?
Yeah, Packers won the preseason, Wags. There's no major injuries. So this is a stacked team. I know that some teams play their starters and do a lot of stuff. That's fine if that's what they want to do. Packers don't do that. And, you can ask the Minnesota Vikings from last season how rusty the Packers looked when they went ahead and kicked their butt in week one. So I think that the team's going to be ready to go. And, I think that they're a stacked team. We've got talent across the board, very, very dangerous attacking offense, and the defense I expect to grow leaps and bounds. There's just so much talent on the defensive side of the ball. Jameis Winston and company, the Saints, the Packers are going to be heading to a kind of a neutral site down in Jacksonville. It's not going to be down in New Orleans. And I'll tell you what, if I'm Jameis Winston, if I'm the Packers, this is a Packers defense that I know there's a new coordinator in Coach Barry, but it's still going to be one that is going to be opportunistic, that is going to get after the quarterback, that's going to try to turn the ball over and flip the field and give a short field to Aaron Rodgers in that offense. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see this season start. The Packers, I don't believe, play a noon game on Sunday for the first 4 or 5 weeks, and that says a lot. The schedule makers think the Packers are going to be good as well. So, Wags, I'm fired up. We're recording this on a Sunday. This is the last Sunday for a long time before we got Packer football every single Sunday coming up.
Yeah, I'm super excited too. I think, one of the things with this team, you said it, is health. And as we look into the season as a whole, it's so hard to predict the schedule. By all accounts, the schedule looks like it could be pretty difficult this season. The Packers have had a lot of fortunate injury luck the last 2 seasons, and that has certainly gone a long way into how they've been able to perform and their overall record. So if our record doesn't quite come in at 13-4, 14-3 or better this year, it may not necessarily mean that this team isn't positioned to make another run in the playoffs. Certainly, we have to get into the playoffs before we can talk about Super Bowl. But it's certainly the expectation with this group. One thing I will say is, before the season last year, you also can't predict how difficult these teams are going to be week 10, week 14. That 49ers game last year at San Francisco, you would have thought that was going to be the toughest game of the season before the season started last year. As it turned out, because of the situation and the injuries they had there, COVID, that may have been the easiest game of the season that they had on the road all year last year. So you just never know how these things are going to shape out, but hopefully for the Packers' sake, they're able to stay relatively healthy again this year, because I think that's going to be the biggest impact to what our overall record ends up being.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I'm excited, Wags. This is a fun podcast. I like doing this one before the season starts. Everybody's got a clean slate, and it's a great chance for us to just start to pick through the roster a little bit and talk a little bit of over-under, talk some predictions on individual players. We have very high expectations this season for the team. However, we've also got a lot of superstars on this team and a lot of great offensive weapons and defensive weapons. So without further ado, Wags, I've got some over-unders I'd like to run past you. I think you've probably got some you'd like to run past me. I'll do you the honor. Do you have anything that's just you've been itching to talk about here?
So I think let's save the team predictions for the end. I think, first of all, let's talk about some breakouts. This isn't necessarily an over-under, but There could be some obvious guys on both sides of the ball. I'm curious to hear who you view as potential breakouts this year. That could be whatever definition you want to decide. I think on the defensive side of the ball, Rashawn Gary is certainly an obvious choice, but I think we've got some other guys there. Chris Barnes, certainly Darnell Savage, depending on how you see someone as a breakout or maybe taking their game to the next level. Those are some guys that I could definitely see penciling in as a breakout. But if we took a poll, I'm sure Rashawn Gary would probably be the runaway winner. But Dane, I'm just kind of curious, starting with the defensive side of the ball, is there anyone that stands out to you outside of Rashawn Gary? I mean, we could talk about all these guys, but who would you choose if you had to pick one guy as a breakout player on the defensive side?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really good question, and you look up and down the roster. There's always surprises, but I think I'm actually going to go out on a limb here a little bit, and it's going to be I'm taking TJ Slayton, actually, 5th-round pick for the Packers, defensive lineman. I'll tell you what, he may not be the guy who's flashy, right? He's not the guy just based on the position. He's going to be taking on double teams, but I think we're going to see a noticeable difference in the run defense this year for the Packers. We're going to be much improved, and a lot of that's going to be because of TJ Slayton. I think he's going to have a chance to earn a lot of snaps early in the season. Question mark I have for him is he's a young guy. He's played college football. Is he going to wear down as the season progresses? But I don't think he's going to. I think that they're going to manage his snaps. They've got 6 defensive linemen. They're there for a reason. I think they'll be rotating a lot of different guys out. And I'll tell you what, if you see TJ Slayton, and I'm just talking to Packer fans in general, you see TJ Slayton out on the field, big number 93, and Kenny Clark's doing a bunch of stuff. Part of the reason he's doing stuff is because TJ Slayton's doing his job, eating up blockers. So, he might not have 10 sacks. In fact, he won't have 10 sacks because that's just not what he does. But I think that he's going to be a big piece to this defense. And Wags, I wouldn't be surprised if as the season progresses, guys in Green Bay have stood out in those big guy roles. I think of BJ Raji over the years. To some of our older listeners, I think of Gilbert Brown over the years. And those are big shoes to fill. But it also really drives home the point that guys in this big man positions can really make an impact on the defense and get fans' attention. And I think that TJ Slayton, both his play on the field and his personality, he's got a big personality. He's charismatic. He's a guy that Packer fans are going to be taking note of as the season goes on. And he's going to free up a lot of these other defenders to do what they need to do.
For sure. And I think that's a really good pick. If you're looking for someone that's maybe a little bit more under the radar, certainly we can, I think Rashawn Gary's a good bet.
He's the guy, right?
Yeah, if he's able to push for double-digit sacks totals this year, which would be a monster season for him in year 3, I think he's the obvious pick. But I do like that, there's other guys that you can look at up and down this defense that could make a significant impact, or the difference between this being, maybe a top 15-ish type defense like we were last year versus being solidly in the top 10. I know that from a metric standpoint, we finished the season, depending on how you look at it, right around the bottom of that top 10. But they didn't really feel like a top 10 defense all season last year. So I think if we're going to take that next step, it's going to have to be guys like TJ Slayton on the defensive line that are making significant contributions and able to help this whole defensive unit elevate to that next level. So I really like that pick. I think Darnell Savage, he, by all accounts, you could say he had a breakout season last year.
Right.
I don't know if nationally or your average NFL fan is totally aware of how good Darnell Savage is and could be. So from that standpoint, I think he might be someone that could make a splash as well in terms of, across the league, he's viewed as one of the top safeties in the game. He played like that in the second half of last season. And now if he's able to carry that through into this season, and all of a sudden the Packers defense makes that leap, he could be the guy that gets a lot of the headlines getting some interceptions. Those are the things that'll get you noticed for the average fan around the league. So I think Darnell Savage is definitely another guy to watch. Chris Barnes, if you're playing individual player defense in fantasy like we do, he's a guy that you might want to pick up. Probably a lot of fans around the league don't know about. Certainly no secret amongst Packer fans, but he's going to rack up a ton of tackles as well. So I think in this defense, there's some young guys that you could pencil in to have quote unquote breakout performances. And if we get that from multiple players across this defense, that's when we're really going to be cooking. So Dane, then over on the offensive side of the ball, I'm not going to pick any of the running backs just personally. The only reason is because certainly Kylan Hill and AJ Dillon are going to be getting their share of work in the backfield. There's no doubt about that, but it's more just superstition on my part not to pick one of those guys as a breakout, because that might mean that Aaron Jones gets hurt in order for one of those guys to truly have a breakout season. I'd prefer Aaron Jones stays healthy and those other two guys contribute in a positive fashion. But I won't hold it against you if you pick one of those guys as a breakout. But if you look around this group, I think it might come from elsewhere. Skill position or otherwise, but who would you be circling as a potential breakout player here on the offensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I'm taking AJ Dillon. Sorry, Wags, to step on that, but I think that he's primed for a much bigger role. I think that he can have a breakout while Aaron Jones is still healthy. The Packers have always given a fair number of snaps to second running back. Sometimes under the McCarthy era, we were all pulling our hair out saying, why isn't Aaron Jones getting the ball more? But I think that Coach LaFleur has shown over the years, the last couple of seasons, I should say, that he is pretty darn good at managing that backfield and making sure that guys are getting their touches, and same with Coach Hackett. So I would say AJ Dillon. I don't know if he's going to be the thing about Aaron Jones is he's so prolific inside the 10-yard line. He's got a nose for the end zone, even though he's not a bigger back. So I see some of these prognosticators, that do fantasy football and the national media that are like, oh, is he going to take all of Aaron Jones' touchdowns away? And I don't see that happening, because Aaron Jones is about as good as it gets in the league at finding the end zone when he's when he's close. But I do see between the 20 to the 20, AJ Dillon grinding out a ton of yards. I see him as a big back who can carry the load in the fourth quarter. I think he's going to turn some heads. He's got that talent level. They drafted him in the second round for a reason. The snaps are available. I know Kylan Hill had a heck of a preseason. They'll find ways to get him involved, but I don't think it's going to cut into AJ Dillon, eight touches maybe a game. 7-8 touches running the ball, and he can do an awful lot with that. And depending on game flow, I could see a scenario, Wags, and I'm curious your thoughts, but I could see a scenario where turns out this was an AJ Dillon week. He's got a hot hand. He's running over linebackers. Let's just keep feeding AJ the ball. Doesn't hurt anybody. Aaron Jones stays fresher for the stretch run. So I think that Dillon has enough there. He could have enough big weeks that the national media and Packer fans, I know Packer fans are already on the AJ Dillon train, but I think nationally, when you talk about breakout, he could be one of those guys where you go, oh, at the end of the year, whoa, holy smokes, he ended up with 700-800 yards rushing and a few touchdowns, and enough to really get people's attention.
Okay, that's really interesting. And that's totally fair. I just don't know if we're going to see the way Kylan Hill played in the preseason. I don't know if AJ Dillon's going to have that true number 2 role that Jamal Williams had the last couple of seasons. So then the question is, if AJ Dillon gives you approximately what Jamal Williams did last year in the same amount of work, I will take that in a heartbeat. But I don't know. That's semantics, but I don't know if I'd qualify that as a breakout. I think that's filling the role that he's expected to. Nonetheless, I would happily take that from AJ Dillon this season. And certainly if he's able to contribute in third down situations, I think it's interesting. Listen to some of the national guys. And if you guys are listening to some of those fantasy podcasts out there, there's some good ones. But a lot of guys are saying, well, AJ Dillon doesn't really catch the ball. I was shocked at how good his hands are. And I think he's going to surprise some people. I don't think he's going to go out and catch 40 to 50 passes this year. but he can definitely catch the ball, and so can Kylan Hill, by the way. He showed that in the preseason. So these guys are both going to get a lot of touches, but they may just not have enough to go around. That's a lot of guys that have to eat. And Aaron Jones is going to still be the primary guy out there for sure. So, Dane, I would have to, I don't know if you're going to love this. I think you will. Maybe you won't. I don't know. I'm going to have to go MVS, though. I think this is the year. We've heard this story. I get it. It's the whole, oh, he's finally locked in. You hear this about guys every year, and for some guys it doesn't work, and some guys it does. I'm going to give MVS the benefit of the doubt here. He's coming in to his third season in the NFL. We know what he can do to take the top off the defenses. If he truly is locked in a little bit more in the meeting rooms, in his preparation, by all accounts, he's taken his practice game to the next level. I don't think it's an accident that when those things happen, it usually translates to consistency. I don't expect him to come out and put up 100 yards plus receiving every week. That's not the type of breakout I'm predicting, but I think a little bit more consistency, fewer drop balls, and taking advantage of the opportunities that he has throughout the season is what we really would be happy with. I mean, if you take a few of those drops away and his catch percentage increases on, give him not all of those deep balls, but a few more of those, just 3 more of those, and maybe a couple of more of those catches on those underneath routes that he hasn't necessarily been super consistent with throughout his career to date. You can easily tack on an extra 250, 300 yards to what he did the last couple of seasons. And now he's pushing 850, 900 yards. Plus we've got that extra game this year. So it's not crazy to think that just a touch more consistency from MVS is all that's between him and pushing or knocking on the door for 1,000-yard receiving season. And so that's going to be an interesting one to watch, but I'm going to go with MVS. I think we're all truly hoping that we have a guy step up opposite opposite Adams.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I'm blanking out. Sorry, Dane. And certainly, I think Lazard is a good candidate to be a guy that'll pick up yards, but he's more of a chain mover to me. So I don't know if I would qualify him as a breakout as much as someone that I expect to just be consistent and fill his role as well. So I'm going to go with MVS, and hopefully this offense continues to cook this year. So, Dane, I think that covers some of the breakouts. I just want to kind of get your feel too. My first over under for you is this defense a top 10 defense this year? And how high are you going if you feel like they're solidly in the top 10? Because I'm excited. Here's the thing as we get into predictions for the Packers record, one thing that I touched on the top is health and injuries. We do have, by all accounts, a tougher schedule this year, but I am very confident in the talent of this team. And I think that's what matters the most when you look at where we think this team could end up and where they want to be. I'm just ultimately very confident in what this team can do. So I think it's going to be the biggest factor is where that defense finishes over the course of the season. So, Dane, what say you? Are they ready to make that jump into being a top 10 defense this year?
They have all the tools in place, I think, to be a top 10 defense. And yeah, I would actually be pretty surprised, barring, something catastrophic happening, if they're not a top 10 defense. They have too much talent in place. I think that, my prediction with TJ Slayton, in addition to Kenny Clark and Kingsley Keke, Kingsley Keke just continuing to grow. He showed his pass rushing potential in year 2, now coming into year 3. Really like what Chris Barnes, if he can just take another step, he doesn't need to be all world to make this defense that much better. They're not going to be throwing it at Jair Alexander too much, Wag. So, if Stokes is able to, show why the Packers draft him the first round, all of a sudden, where are the weak spots in this defense? The safety play is top notch. Jair Alexander's top corner in the league. Pass rushers are there. I mean, got to keep an eye on Big Z's back, right? That's a question mark with Zadarius Smith's back right now. So there's question marks, but there's enough talent here that I think this is a top 10 defense. In fact, I think it could be anywhere in the, 3 to 7 range in there. I think they can actually be that good. I know it's a bold prediction, but with the new defensive coordinator coming in, I think this is going to be aggressive. I think they're simplifying a couple things. We're not seeing as much 3 deep safety. Coach LaFleur has said time and again, and he does not speak out of turn very often, that you got to hit guy. You can't be back 7 yards, on a 3rd and 4 type scenario. Now we may give up a couple more big plays here and there. We may see some growing pains early in the season with a new defensive coordinator in place. But I think by the time the season's over, the Packers defense could be one of the strong points of this team. They've just got enough talent in place. And once the D train starts going, they start feeding off each other. They can be very, very nasty real quick. We've seen flashes of it, Wags, against good teams, against bad teams over the last couple of years. I think this is the year we put it all together. I think that I don't like seeing guys lose their job, but I think the coaching change was necessary at defensive coordinator. And I think it's not just the players or just the coaching scheme. I think it's a sum of all of its parts. They've been building, and they've been investing in the defensive side of the ball a heck of a lot over the last couple of years. And this is where all their investment really pays off. And I think this could actually be a very, very special defense.
For sure. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is the turnover margin. That's something that most analytics experts will say you can't necessarily project from year to year. The Packers defensively have been above average, and by above average, I say like around that 13 to 15 range defensively in years where they've had a strong turnover margin. So it's almost like their defense hasn't necessarily been very good, but they've been able to cover up some warts when they've had good turnover margin years. We know the offense doesn't typically turn the ball over all that much. So if the defense is able to force takeaways, usually that's a harbinger of good things. How well are we able to get after the quarterback with the guys that we have up front? I've got a lot of confidence, little concern that Zadarius Smith has been nursing some back injuries. Those are things that can tend to linger a little bit. Is Preston Smith going to be able to bounce back from a little bit of a down season last year? Does Rashawn Gary make that leap and get into hopefully maybe that double-digit sack range? More importantly than the number of sacks, so is you getting consistent pressure on the quarterback? That to me is more important than how many sacks he ends up with at the end of the day. So those are the things that are going to be, making a big impact on how this defense does overall. I got a lot of talent on our secondary, but they can't cover guys all day.
Right.
So we're going to need a little bit of improvement, I think, in the consistency of those guys up front. We've gotten production, but sometimes it seems like it's gone a little bit up and down depending on the opponent. And certainly there are teams that are able to get rid of football and protect the quarterback better than others. But I think this defense needs to be able to bring it every week in terms of the intensity. And I think that's been something that's been lacking a little bit at times in the past as well. So I'm hoping that the intensity that Coach Barry shows being down on the sideline is something that will push us over the top in that regard.
Yeah. You mentioned Preston Smith. I just have to ask you, over under 7 sacks for Preston Smith this year.
Okay, so you're getting right into it.
I got to know, he's somebody that I think a lot about, right? He took a pay cut to stay in Green Bay, thought at times he was playing out of position last year. They're asking him to do things maybe he, in my opinion, isn't his strong suit. So new coaching staff, or at least new defensive coordinator. I got to know, Preston, I think that a lot of this does hinge on Preston Smith bouncing back a little bit from a production standpoint if he's not able to get pressure. So, I'm curious what your take is.
He's one of those guys that I would probably lean towards the under, to be honest with you. And it's not because I don't, like Preston to bounce back this year. In some ways, he could end up being more consistent and productive overall without getting those sack numbers. I think the consistency is how much he is getting pressure on the quarterback. He's never been a huge sack numbers guy if you look throughout his career. So I don't expect him to come out and put up 14 sacks this year. That's just not the type of guy he is. He's very sound and setting the edge, and he can drop back in coverage. I know that drives us crazy sometimes in certain situations, but he is very good at that from that position. It can throw the offense off balance at times. So I think Preston, he's more the guy that sets the table. And so what he can do so effectively is running some of those double stunts. And that can enable, he's going to, bring attention on himself. There's no doubt about that. But if he can set the table for Za'Darius and Rashawn Gary, he's going to get sacks, but those guys might be the finishers more often than not. So I would have to say a slight under for Preston Smith on the 7.5 sacks, but that's a good one, Dane. I don't know if you have an answer to that, or otherwise I was going to go back to our running back breakouts and ask you about some over-unders for our
let's go to the running back. I think Preston Smith's under as well, but he bounces back and is very productive. He actually reminds me a little bit of Rashawn Gary in college, where he eats up blockers but isn't necessarily making the splashy play. I think Preston Smith's job is to just be disruptive and allow Smith and Rashawn Gary to eat, and I think that's what they're going to do. So yeah, I'd love to hear what's your running back over.
Well, you already were talking about AJ Dillon as a guy that could end up with 800-900 yards rushing. Yeah. Courtesy of The Athletic, I've got some player projections here this season. They've got him at 620 yards as their projected number on 138 carries. So that's right in about the same number. Jamal Williams was getting typically 110 to 140 carries per year in the last few seasons. And we've got that added game, of course, here this season. So, it makes sense from a projection standpoint to slot AJ Dillon into that same workload. You could argue whether he's going to get more or less than that, but so it sounds like you're probably going to take the over on the yards. But then my question is twofold for you. Then they've got him at 4 touchdowns, and then we've got Aaron Jones at 1,110 yards rushing. So is Aaron Jones going to be over or under that 1,110 yards with you projecting AJ Dillon definitely north of that 620? And then is AJ Dillon going to poach some touchdowns? We've got him at 4. That's about the same number Jamal Williams has typically had either rushing or in the pass game the last few seasons as well. So over under 4 touchdowns for AJ Dillon and over under 1,110 yards overall rushing for Aaron Jones.
Under on the 1,100 yards for Aaron Jones. I think he's going to be at the 1,000 mark, give or take a little bit. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. It's not just running the ball, but when we talk about the wide receivers, they're so deep across the board. Also with the extra game, I think that fans are going to see a little bit of NBA light where you see guys maybe get a little bit of rest more. I know it's just one game, but that's 4 more quarters of a very, very violent football game, the NFL level. So I think that Aaron Jones will have a very good year. But I think that they are going to make sure to manage his snaps a little bit. And I think that AJ Dillon's largely going to be the benefactor of that. AJ Dillon's going to have slightly more touchdowns. I think he might have 5. So I'm going to go over, but it's a slight over. I'm not sitting here saying AJ Dillon's going to have double-digit touchdowns or anything like that. He's just, I don't project that to happen. But I think Dillon has a nice year. They had him at 620 yards rushing roughly. I think that he's closer to the 750 or so range because I think he has the ability to take games over. And that's why I really envision games where maybe the script calls for we're going to get a heavy dose of Aaron Jones today, but Dillon has a couple strong runs early in the game. They're like, you know what? Let's ride this train and see what he's got today. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of game flow on this, and Aaron Jones, consummate professional, isn't going to be the guy complaining in Coach LaFleur's ear either, because he's got big picture in mind. He wants to win a ring. So for all of those reasons, it's not because of a lack of Aaron Jones, but I think it's just game flow is going to allow for some of this, and AJ Dillon is going to just have some standalone value because of that.
Yeah, for sure. Now, if the Packers offense is as good as we predict, and the Packers defense is as good as you're predicting,
Mm-hmm.
then we could be ahead in a lot of games. And why would we have Aaron Jones out there in the fourth
That's right.
quarter grinding away with the football? So I think that's a really excellent point, Dane. And so I like being able to keep him fresh and share some of that workload. It certainly, whenever those situations come up, why wouldn't we do that? So
Mm-hmm.
makes total sense. Then jumping over to the defensive side, an over under I have for you. You talked about Chris Barnes, tackle machine.
Yeah.
You know, when we look at over under tackles for the whole season, obviously this is going to be very health dependent, but just taking his production last year, he was about 6 tackles overall per game between solos and assists.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to extend that out to a 17 game season, over under 110 tackles this year for Chris Barnes. I put a little cherry on top just to make you think about it a little bit more as well.
Well, this is a hard one to project because I'm not fully read in on how Coach Barry's going to use guys this year. We did sign Campbell as well, who came in. So the veteran presence. These are overall tackles. This is tough, Wags. I'm going to say slightly over. Slightly over. He's a tackle machine. He's also shown that he can be productive while he's hurt. He played last year with the club on his hand at one point. So he's somebody who's proven that, he'll be out there if he can be out there. Based on what we've always seen from this defense the last few years, middle linebacker is a tackle machine for the Packers defense, no matter who they put out there. I think Chris Barnes is actually, I think he has more upside than Blake Martinez ever had. And I know there's some Blake Martinez fans out there, but I like Barnes. I like Barnes' long-term projection as well. And I think that he gets those tackles probably, at the expense of Campbell. They're going to sign him. I think Campbell gets snaps early, but Chris Barnes is probably going to be too good to take off the field as the season goes on. So I've got him slightly over. I'm not projecting 150 tackles or anything like that, but I think between tackles and assisted tackles, he finds the ball pretty well. He's going to be in the 120 or so range. What's your take on Chris Barnes? He's had a heck of a start to his NFL career. I'm kind of curious where your head's at with him right now.
So he's going to be out there all 3 downs, which is important, and I think he can cover the field sideline to sideline. That's the biggest thing. I mean, he's not the biggest guy, but he's able to get off blocks, and I think he's aggressive and moving downhill. And that's what I really like most about him is, we've had some linebackers in the past that almost look a little bit tentative, and they're filling the hole, but then they can get beat a lot when the running back turns his jets on and gets to that second level. You've got to be moving downhill and getting off blocks and maintaining gap discipline while you're doing that. And I think Chris Barnes just has an eye for the game that some players just don't possess. Let's be honest. And so that I think is what I like best about him is he seems to have the mental approach to what he's doing out there down, and that leads into production because he has the physical tools as well. So I like Chris Barnes with an over on that as well. When you're talking about 110 plus tackles, I mean, you miss 1 or 2 games, and it's probably going to be hard to hit that number. So I mean, even if he just gets a minor injury, that could have an impact on being able to attain that result. But he did rack up huge numbers in his first season. So I think it stands to reason he might be even able to take it to the next level here this year. Dane, have one more for you on the offensive side of the ball. Well, not just one more, but I want to turn it over to you because I know you have a couple for me as well. So big one. So let's go with the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
We have a projection here from The Athletic, 4874. So let's just call it 4,900 pass yards and 39 and a half touchdowns. Curious what you think. He was able to get over that touchdown number, the yardage number, not so much. This is one of those things where that extra game makes a difference too. He easily cleared the number for touchdowns last year. What do you think he's going to do from a projection standpoint this year? Would you take over or under on both of those projections?
Under. I'm going to go under on both. Aaron's going to have a really nice year. He's in the third year of this offense now. He's clearly becoming more and more comfortable. I think he's going to have a monster year, but I also think that there's just so many weapons. We're running the ball. I think Aaron Jones last year had less, like half the touchdowns almost than what he had 2 years ago. I think the Packers are going to find a way to get a little bit more running game going near the red zone. That's going to cut down on Aaron Rodgers' touchdown throws. I mean, Aaron Rodgers had an out of mind historic year last year. So anybody who's expecting him to match those numbers this year, I mean, not a slight on Aaron. Aaron's as good as it gets. It's just, my goodness, if you're expecting him to do MVP all the time, I don't have that in me. But I think he's going to have a very, very, very good year. In fact, he might have another great year. Yardage is where it gets a little harder with that extra game, and if he's airing it out a little bit. But I just think my gut tells me they're going to try to establish the run. They've kind of got this three-headed monster potentially at the running back position. That's, I guess, the biggest backup I have at this point is he's got all these weapons. He's going to be spraying the ball all over the field. But with that in mind, if we can get up on a couple games, maybe Aaron's not playing some quarters. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen to kind of take away some of the yardage. So I don't have some scientific answer here, but my gut tells me it's going to be a little bit lower across the board. And I think a lot of that's going to be because the running game is going to be flourishing this year.
Okay. And it would be interesting to see. I mean, this run game under Coach LaFleur the last 2 years has been productive. It's not been the McCarthyism of we're going to get the run game going, hand the ball off on first down, hand the ball off on second down, and Aaron get us a first down on third and long. So we have not been predictable in that regard. So I don't think it's going to be something that is going to impact the overall rhythm and flow of this offense. It is interesting that you say that you expect them to run the ball more often in the red zone this year. Is that a keep things fresh and unpredictable thing, or because then you're taking the ball away from maybe one of the most efficient red zone throwers in NFL history. So I don't know if I completely agree with you on that. I think we've run the ball a decent percentage of the time in the red zone. I think that's about the balance that I'd like to see, quite honestly. We definitely need to continue to shed our ghost of third and fourth and short past because those things tend to rear their ugly head. But I think that Aaron is still going to be very, very efficient in red zone. And by the way, he's got one of his favorite targets back in Randall Cobb. And so the red zone is where things tend to break down a little bit. And so when he has those guys that he's in sync with and can make those throws and plays, I think he'll still be productive there. That all said, I agree with you. I'm going to take the under on both of those two. Slight under. I think he's going to have a really good season. But look, he could throw 36 touchdown passes and have, a monster offensive season this year. So it would not be a disappointment by any means if Aaron Rodgers doesn't eclipse 40 touchdown passes this year.
Yeah, and Wags, and just piggybacking off that, I think part of the reason for me as well is just David Bakhtiari's out. You've got your all-pro left tackle out. They're not at full strength at the offensive line, even though Elton Jenkins seems to be Superman and can play anywhere at incredibly high level. But that, does take away then from a different spot, right? He's not playing his natural spot at the guard position. So I think that where the Packers are able, they're going to try to establish the run early, maybe take a little bit more pressure off some of the young guys up front. They're been trying to shuffle around and figure out who they want to have their best five. I think that this is still going to be a very, very good offensive line, but especially early in the year, as growing pains are going, they're not going to want to expose Aaron Rodgers to shots unnecessarily. So if they're able to run the ball, I think they're going to run the ball. And I think that also plays into some of that. Now, I expect us to be humming by about week 10 or so, but early, those first 4 or 5 games, especially before Bach is back, I just wouldn't be surprised if they have the option, let's run the ball early and just kind of keep that pressure off of Aaron.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's going to be interesting to see how well that offensive line is able to stay healthy because they're going to need to get through at least 6 weeks, probably a couple more than that without David Bakhtiari. So we've got Elton Jenkins potentially playing close to half the season at left tackle. I love Elton Jenkins, but if we have any other injuries to any of those 5 guys up front, it's going to make me pretty nervous.
Yeah.
So, and we don't have a bye until week 13. So we'll look at the overall schedule here momentarily. But you're circling week 10. It's interesting. That's right when the schedule, by all accounts, really starts to get pretty challenging. I'm kind of circling right in that week 7 area is when things start to get pretty challenging for the Packers, because if you just look at who they're playing and some of their opponents in that stretch, it's just going to be pretty challenging to, eke out wins. That could be a point of the season where we're really pushing to get to that bye week, depending on how healthy the roster is. So I am hopeful that Bakhtiari is cleared and is close to full health and is able to jump back in there pretty quickly. But realistically, he's going to need probably at least a week or two of practice before he's out there on the field. So, Dane, do you have any other individual player over unders? I mean, we could go across this whole roster if you wanted to.
I got to know Davante Adams, 1,300 yards. He's had some monster years the last couple of years. 3 years ago, I believe it was 3 years ago, he just missed the 1,000-yard mark because he'd been hurt for 4 weeks. But, outside of that, he would have had another monster year that year, if not for that injury. So Davante's been hovering around that 1,300-yard mark. Curious, is he going to be able to do that with all the weapons on this offense this year?
I'm going to go under, but it's only because he's missed a couple games in both of the last couple of seasons. And I hope he's healthy all 17 games and can go the full season this year in a contract year. One of the things I'll be interested to see here, we've had no news on the Davante Adams contract extension front. Does something come out here
right
before week 1 here against the Saints? This is kind of the window when the Packers traditionally have extended some of their key guys. I'm sure Davante and his agent would love to get him locked up with that extension to make him the highest paid wide receiver before they take the field here in week 1. And he gives himself a risk of injury here during the season. So that will be interesting to see. But I'm going to go under, if only because if he misses a couple of games like he has the last couple of seasons, I think it's going to be one of those situations that on a per game basis, he would have been on pace to definitely clear that, but probably just doesn't get there at the end of the season.
One more. Defensively, Kevin King, over under 9 starts for the Packers on
under. Under. The only way he goes over is if Jair or Eric Stokes is not healthy the whole season. So I'm going to go under on that one as well.
Okay. Those were the last ones I had on my end, Wags.
Dane, I have one more for you then, because this is your favorite position, I think, on the offense. Well, they're all your favorite, let's be honest, but tight end.
Yeah.
I want to know, does Bob Tonyan, is he going to come anywhere close to his touchdown numbers last year? At the Athletic is only project him at 6.5 touchdowns this year. So do you think that he goes over that number, or is he going to have a regression to the mean this season?
So we've got our fantasy football draft, you and I, later today. I don't know if I want to be giving away all my secrets right now on how I feel about some.
Why do you think I asked you the question?
I think he goes over. I think that he's a touchdown machine in the red zone. I know that Randall Cobb's joined Green Bay or back in Green Bay, but I think Randall's going to be more of a threat on third down. That's going to be where he's going to be making his bread and butter near the red zone. Aaron likes to find those big body guys wherever he can, between Davante, between Lazard and some of these others, but 100% Bob Tonyan as well. Roger seems to have an affinity for Robert Tonyan. He's going to find ways to get him open. And Tonyan found some ways on his own to get open last season, had a couple monster games. I think his yardage might not be massive, but I think that he is a red zone threat, and he's just a mismatch. When the Packers spread everybody out, if we're talking 4 receivers out there or 3 receivers and a running back in the backfield, and then you've got Tonyan, how are you covering everybody? If everybody's healthy, this is a stacked team. So I think that Robert Tonyan is going to be able to beat enough safeties and enough linebackers in the red zone to get over that 6.5. I think he's going to land around 8 touchdowns this year, Wags.
Okay, I love it. Yep. So now I know where to take Bob Tonyan in the draft.
Round 2, baby. Round 2, Wags.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so Dane, is that all you have for individual player projections, or did you have any other guys that you wanted to hit on?
Those were the main guys. I'm just kind of looking. I also just one last one. Aaron Rodgers over under 4 interceptions this year, and I know that's a crazy low number at the NFL level. But what's your read?
I'll go over. There's too much randomness
Mm-hmm.
for him to go under that number, and quite honestly, I don't want him to be under that number. As crazy as that may sound, he needs to be aggressive throwing the ball downfield, and tip passes, drops where it goes through someone's hands when they're outstretched, and all of a sudden it goes into the hands
Right.
of a safety. Those things are going to happen. So when he had 2 interceptions a few seasons ago, I just I don't even want to relive that because there were some things that I wasn't loving about Aaron Rodgers at that time, and I want to just stay in my space where I'm loving how Aaron Rodgers plays football right now, and with everything that he's doing with Coach LaFleur, I don't need to relive that right now. So I think he'll go over. He's never going to be someone that's going to throw 15 interceptions. At least
No.
I hope not. But if he's in that 6 to 8 interceptions, you live with that. That's not a huge deal to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. What do we got next on the docket, Wags?
So let's look at over-unders for wins. And I think not just the
Yeah.
Packers, but let's look around the rest of the division. So NFC North, starting with the Detroit Lions, courtesy of FanDuel, their over-under for the season is 5. So, what do you expect across the division? Because I think the reason I like to look at the rest of the teams is that to me is going to clearly make the biggest impact on how the Packers are able to do. They're certainly the hands-on favorite to win the NFC North division. The Packers are minus 145 favorites. Next in line is Vikings at plus 250. So the Packers certainly heavy favorites to win the North. But are any of these other teams going to take a step forward? It was definitely a down division last year. Starting with the Detroit Lions, they've got a new coach in Dan Campbell. It certainly seems like he's very Detroit. Let's just put it that way, and kind of coaches they typically like to hire. But do you think the Lions, without Matthew Stafford now this season, are going to be able to put together enough to be competitive and get over that 5-win total?
No, no. I think they probably hit it on the head at 5. I think it's a bit of a mess. Their offense looks like a mess this year. Just realistically, they signed Jamal Williams, who I love Jamal, but they've got some other kids that they've spent some draft capital on at the running back position, and it seems like they're not going to give him the keys to the car. Jared Goff is Jared Goff. I mean, when it looks like their tight end TJ Hawkinson might be their number one weapon on the offensive side of the ball, that would concern me. Hawkinson's a good football player, but I just across the board, I don't know how they're scoring touchdowns, Wags. And this is a league where you got to score touchdowns to stay competitive. Not to speak of a defense that I think has enough holes in it. So I if I have to choose, I'll say under. I think 5 is probably the correct number, but under. I just don't think that they're really going to be an option this year.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. The only thing is that the optimist in me looks at week 18 against the Packers. The Packers could have home field advantage all wrapped up by then. Hopefully, that would be a nice thing.
That'd be nice.
So, are we giving that game away? Does that put them over their win total for the year? Who knows?
No, Jordan Love will tear them up in week 18 if that's.
I love
case.
it. Well, I don't have a lot of optimism that the Lions are going to be posing a real threat. They tend to be a team that the Packers, surprisingly have struggled with at times, even when they haven't had their best teams. We play down to their level at times. Hopefully that's not the case this year, but I don't think they're going to be making a lot of noise in the NFC North. So moving then to the next team in the projections, Chicago Bears at 7.5 is their over under. Starting the season with Andy Dalton as their starting quarterback. Certainly Bears fans are looking for rookie Justin Fields to come in sooner than later. Are you riding that hype train? And are the Bears able to be an improvement here? Coach Nagy might be on the hot seat here if he doesn't turn things around pretty early in the season for the Chicago Bears.
I think that Coach Nagy is going to do just enough to keep his job, and it's going to keep us smiling. And I think it's going to be because Fields. I don't know if I'm riding the hype train, but I think he's better than Dalton, and I also think he'll probably be starting around week 2 or 3 for the Bears. I just don't see a scenario where Dalton's hanging on to that job for all that long. They've got some good pieces. They've got a good running back. Allen Robinson's a heck of a wide receiver for them. They've got enough going on. Their defense, they've got a couple pieces here and there that I think can play ball. 7.5 wins. I'll take the over slight. They're probably an 8-win team, maybe, in this expanded field. They might beat up on the Lions. I think they take 2 from the Lions. So right there, right, we start talking, and I'm not looking at their schedule in front of me, but they've got enough pieces to win some football games here. And I think that they do just enough. And I think part of it's because Fields is electric enough. He's mobile. Even when things break down offensively, he's going to be able to create. Now, do I think he's the answer? I don't know. Who knows, right? Who knows what these rookie quarterbacks look like when the bullets start really flying. But I think that he keeps it interesting. He's an electric, exciting player that, can put up some stats. But I think that any fans that are expecting this Bears roster, even with good quarterback play, to all of a sudden make the playoffs, I don't see that happening. I think the Vikings are still a better overall team than the Bears. I think the Packers are certainly an overall better team. So I'll take a 8-win. I'll take the Bears for the over. But again, I think that they're right in that range, but they're not a playoff team, Legs.
Yeah, I've got them at the over too. Actually, I like them to make a little bit of a bounce, and I think they're going to get better over the course of the season.
Yeah, exactly.
The Bears have been a team that in many years they seem to start hot, including last year, by the way, and then they, really hit a tough stretch and kind of fell apart a little bit in the middle of the season. So I think the opposite might be the case this year, where they may not start off quite as hot. If they do, that may be a little bit nervous, but I think they're going to be a team. You're exactly right. Fields will be, he's going to start. This isn't a situation where Andy Dalton's going to ride the starting position through the end of the season and the Bears have a magical, 13-4 season under Andy Dalton. I just don't see that happening. But I think they will get better. Fields will galvanize them. He's going to be inconsistent, super talented guy.
Yeah.
They could be someone that I think might be nipping at the Packers' heels at times throughout the season, because I actually have them finishing second in the division behind the Packers. I like the Bears defensively. I think they're a little bit stronger. I think they've got a few more weapons. And the Vikings, they've got some talented guys. We'll get to them in a second. But they're a team that, I don't know. I think a few injuries could derail their season in a hurry, and I'm not predicting that to happen. You never know what's going to happen, but and I think certainly the Vikings. Let's just jump into it. Their over/under is 8.5. They've got the most experienced coach in the division. They've got a pretty solid roster. I don't think they're as talented up and down this roster as they were a few years ago when they were talking Super Bowl before the season. But they've got some guys. I just ultimately I don't know the Kirk Cousins COVID situation.
It's a weird thing.
It's a weird thing, and I think it is a thing, to be honest with you. I mean, you never know if he's going to miss, a start here or there because of COVID protocols. How does that affect the locker room and the chemistry of this team? I don't know. It's an odd thing. And to me, the Vikings from the outside looking in seem to be the best candidate to have kind of that year from hell where things kind of just go wrong. And so it's not so much as much an indictment on some of the talented guys they have on that team, because Justin Jefferson, Dalvin Cook on the offensive side of the ball, Irv Smith, a tight end, could be making a breakout this season if everything goes right. But I'm going to go under for the Vikings on the 8.5 this year. I just don't have, it's a gut feeling that they're not a team that's going to have things go their way.
Interesting. Yeah, and I know that Irv Smith's dealing with some kind of injury as well. I haven't seen the latest on how long he's going to be out, but I did see that he's battling something on his end. I think this is a year that I feel like Zimmer, the head coach of the Vikings, has been slowly losing the locker room for about 2 seasons now. And I think this is probably the year that it all bubbles to the surface and it's over. I think that the COVID stuff, I've seen Zimmer quotes saying I'm paraphrasing, I'm not quoting him, but basically saying like he's not happy with what's going on. It's never good when your head coach is directly against what the quarterback's saying. I mean, that's just it's not a good scene. They drafted Mund in the third round, I believe, second or third round quarterback. I think that young guy gets some snaps this year. I think he's going to get a couple starts. I still don't understand, but I'm very grateful that they extended Kirk Cousins and gave him a lot of money because it just doesn't make sense to me. But I would agree, and I think that they're going to be slightly under. I think that they're in the 7 to 8 range as well, and they're kind of battling the Bears for second in the division. They're also a team that at times can prove challenging for the Packers throughout the year, but at a certain point the wheels are just going to fall off in Minnesota. And I think that Mike Zimmer, while he may end the season as head coach, if we're sitting here doing this podcast next year, I think we're talking about the new head coach of the Vikings, whoever it may be. I don't see it happening for them this year.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of aligned on where these teams end up then this year. So that leads us to the Packers.
Mm-hmm.
Over under is 10.5. Interesting. Packers are a 13-win team the last 2 seasons, and we added a 17th game.
Yeah.
Projections have the Packers coming down. Now, certainly Vegas is never going to throw a number like 13 out there realistically for the Packers. It's going to go where the money is. But to me, the biggest stretch that worries me is starting in week 7. We've got the Washington football team, and then we're at Arizona, at Kansas City, back home for the Seattle Seahawks, at Minnesota, and then back home for the Rams before that week 13 bye. Depending on how those teams are shaping up at that point of the season, right now, that looks like a pretty difficult stretch as we're heading into that bye. So the health of the team at that point could have an impact on how well we're able to come out of that. But realistically, if Packers come through that relatively unscathed, I think that would point to the over. If we have a few more bumps than hurdles during that stretch of the season, that could make things pretty challenging. Listen, we're going to have to come out strong this season too. We can't afford to start slow and have kind of that 2-2 type start. We really need to come out of the gate strong and get out in front because this is a long season. And so we're not going to go through this 17-0, folks. But we do need to make sure that we start solidly. And so it's going to be interesting to see how well we do with all of our main guys not getting really any work in the preseason. Are we rusty? That week 1 opponent, Saints, will be diving into that on Thursday. They'll be ready to go too. So the Packers are going to have to be ready right from the get-go. Okay, Dane, I'm going to let you predict first. Do you have the Packers over or under 10.5 wins this season?
We're over. We're at 12. I think we're 12-5 football team. I know it looks like a tough schedule. It is a tough schedule, but you're right. The seasons shake out very weird as they go on. Everything, of course, is predicated on health in this league, but even against all these tough teams, this team can stack up against anybody in the league. I really think that. I think that this Packer team is a heavyweight. There's a few heavyweights in the entire NFL. The Packers are one of them. I think that we can outclass a lot of these teams. I think Aaron Rodgers can outclass Washington football team. I think that he can outclass Matt Stafford and the Rams because he's done both of those over the last couple of years, not them combined, but I just think that Aaron Rodgers and this Packer offense have so many weapons. I do think that this likely is Aaron's last year in Green Bay. I think that he's going to be going all out. He always goes all out, but I think that this team has a really sour taste in their mouth. We've talked to some of these guys before the season started, before saying that they had a sour taste from that NFC Championship game. There's no mistake about it. Too many weapons. I think the defense is improved. All that means is that we are getting a shorter field for Aaron Rodgers. That makes it so dangerous. If this defense can step up, make some stops, and we're able to give Aaron an even shorter field than he's worked with in past years, watch out the rest of the league. I just think there's too much talent here, Wags, I guess is how we sum it up. If everybody's where they need to be for the majority of the year, I don't know how you cover this offense and offensively for the opposing team. I think that we can throw too many different looks at opposing offenses most weeks for them to have too much success against the defense. So I think that we're over, and I think we're a 12-win team this year.
Yeah, and I think 12 is the conservative number. That's the exact
Mhm.
number I put down too. I get it. From the outside in, people are, oh, is Aaron gonna, you know, make this team dysfunctional from the
Yeah.
inside? I don't see it,
Doesn't seem
honestly.
like it.
It
No.
just doesn't seem like it. We'll have some bumps in the road, just like every team, but we'll be fine. And
Yep.
so again, the only thing that makes me nervous is the health of that offensive line
Yep.
early in the season, in particular. That's something that can rear its ugly head. We've been super fortunate for the last couple of seasons. I think we're in an okay position in terms of depth, pretty much everywhere else on the roster. Certainly, you can't afford to get a bug or a run of injuries at one position group, really anytime. But I'm confident in the talent and the depth that we have. That next man in, particularly for short term injuries, will be fine. So I'm confident in what we're going to do out there. And if we do make that step and we're solidly in that top 10 defensively, sky's the limit. Again, I'm not going to sit here and predict us to go 16-1, but
No.
I think this is a Packers team that could pose some significant challenges for every opponent that they face if they're putting that much pressure on the scoreboard on the offensive side of the ball and that much pressure on the quarterback and turning the ball over of the opposition on the defensive side of the ball. It's going to be tough to keep up to them.
Mhm.
Let's be honest. So I'm very bullish. It's a challenging schedule, but I like this team to definitely fall into that range as well at 12-5. So Dane, I think that pretty much wraps up our predictions. Do you have anything else that you want to get into as far as outside the box predictions with this team this year?
I don't have predictions. I other than I'll just say that I think that the punting position, I know it's the punter, but it's a huge upgrade. If he plays anywhere better, I'm not trying to pile on J.K. Scott, but Packers trading for Corey Bajorquez, and he's played in cold weather, played for the Bills, can flip the field a little bit more, and if we can get a few more yards out of that, that's been one of the things that have kind of stuck in my side for a number of years here now. And I was really surprised actually that the Packers made the change that they did when they did it. But they did. I think that right now, I imagine Mason Crosby's working with his long snapper and with his new holder quite a bit to get ready for week one. The Packers also brought in a new long snapper, and it's just something to keep an eye on. They brought in a new long snapper to be a part of the practice squad, and I know that those are not necessarily sexy positions, but field goals are in big moments, and you can't afford to leave points out on the field. So just something to keep an eye on, Wags. Not a prediction, but I thought that was a pretty it was a bigger change of a roster spot than just, it's just a punter, quote unquote. There's a lot that goes into that kind of move. And it's not a move that the Packers necessarily have always made over the years. So the Packers are being aggressive early. And I don't expect anything less from Goody. Goody's been very aggressive to try to upgrade wherever he sees fit. And he just did that again.
Yeah, sure. I think we'll be hopefully better there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't talk about special teams because, frankly, they make me nervous. What
Yep.
we've seen in the preseason didn't give me a lot of confidence that there's going to be a significant improvement in
Mm-hmm.
all of those areas from last year. So we'll see. I know we said that we can't really get any worse, but I mean, my
We could.
goodness, is as awful as it sounds. Like if we could be like the 20th ranked special teams unit, I would take that right
Yeah.
now. And that's kind of sad to say, but it's just reality at this point. So, hopefully Coach Straighten is able to get improvement with the special teams units over the course of the season because we need it. That's for sure. And hopefully Mason Crosby, that missed 28-yard field goal in the last preseason game is a complete nothing burger, which I
Mm-hmm.
expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But he may not be quite as efficient as he was last year. Let's just, it's going to be hard. He can't do better. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, so we'll see what happens with the special teams, but that's kind of a week-to-week project in my mind. So, all right, Dane, I think that about does it for us then today. Can
Mm-hmm.
you hit up all of the things that people need to check out from us before we
Yeah,
sign
we've
off?
got a lot going on, Wags. We are now part of the Pigskin Podcast Network. We're very excited to be a part of that. You can find us wherever you get your podcast, really. We're talking iTunes. We've got a new YouTube channel that we want you to check out. We've got a ton of old content there from our interviews from a lot of the players before the season started. You can find us on Google. You can find us on YouTube Music and Spotify and all these different spots. Also, we're on Instagram, Lombardi's Legends. We're on Facebook. We're actually streaming live on Facebook as we record this, so go check us out there. You can actually see video of us there. We're on Twitter. Wags, I feel like we're everywhere these days.
Yeah, somehow we have, made our way into the inner circle of the Packers Twitter sphere and social media consciousness. But, really appreciate you listening, following along. Again, we'll be back on Thursday night for our week 1 preview against the New Orleans Saints. Can't wait to dive into that. So thanks so much for following along and listening. And as always, go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.